Now, in this technical demonstration, we're going to focus on the Centrify connector. Now, it's important to remember that the Centrify connector is that link between the Centrify Identity Platform and the Active Directory environment. Now, there are two methods for registering a Centrify connector. The first is going to be using credentials. Now, with credentials, we want to be very careful. We don't want those credentials to have too much privilege to give them the ability of having lateral movement within any part of the environment. So we're going to limit them. In order to do that, we're going to create a Centrify directory service user, just as we did before with our contractors. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to click on Add User, and we're going to call this the Connector Manager. Very simple. It's got an identifier, and we'll go ahead and call this connectors at greensafe.lab, and we'll give this a display name, once again, Connector Manager. Now, this is going to be what I'm going to call a very generic account that we're going to use just to register Centrify connectors. We'll go ahead and give it a password. We'll go ahead and scroll down here. We're going to set this not to expire, and we won't worry about sending out an invite, and we'll click Create User. So now we have a user. Now this user does not have a role. Okay, so we need to create a role specifically for connectors. So we'll go over to Roles, we'll click Add Role, and we're going to call this one Connectors Role, and we'll go over to Administrative Rights. Now, one of the nice things about the Centrify Identity Platform when it relates to Centrify connectors is we do have an administrative right already built in that gives us the ability to register and administer connectors. We're not giving out too much privilege, we're giving out just enough. So we'll go ahead and select that option, we'll click Add, and we'll go over to Members, and we'll add in that new account. Connector Manager, click Add, and now we click Save. Now again, we're doing this because we're going to use credentials to register the Centrify connector. So let's go ahead and install the connector now. And we're going to install it on this particular system. So we'll go down to Settings under Network. And we'll click Add Connector. And we'll go ahead and download the Windows-based connector software. We'll go ahead and extract the applications. And now we'll go ahead and launch the installation. Now the installation is all wizard driven, so we'll click Next and we'll accept the terms of our license agreement. We're not going to make any changes here. We're simply installing a new connector. We'll click Next and we'll click Install. And now that we've completed the Centrify connector installation, we'll click Finish, and the connector configuration wizard will automatically launch. So now we'll go ahead and click Next. We are going to use strong encryption protocols, so we'll go ahead and click Next. Now for this demonstration, we're not using a web proxy server to access the identity platform, so we'll leave that alone and click Next. And now we'll need to supply some specific information. What we're going to need is the tenant URL. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to simply copy it directly from the browser. Now this is a custom tenant that I use for training, but you will use the tenant URL that you're supplied with. We'll go back over to the configuration and we'll simply paste it right in there, and we're not going to make any other changes here. When we click Next, you're going to notice that we're going to be prompted to authenticate. This is to authenticate with credentials. We'll go ahead and click Continue, and we're going to use that Connector Manager account to register the connector. Once I've authenticated, I'll now be able to continue through the configuration by setting up the Properties page. Now this is going to apply to the Active Directory administration screens that you'll see in ADUC, for example. So from here, we're not going to make any changes. We're going to leave this intact using the current credentials because I'm logged in as a domain administrator. And we'll go and click Next. We'll now need to select our domain. And you will receive a message indicating that users will need to be owners of the deleted objects container. This is so that we can communicate properly to identify deleted activities. We'll go ahead and click Yes. And then it will run through a series of tests, looking for the certificate check, the connectivity check, web proxy, and the time synchronization. All of those tests were successful, so we can continue. Click Next. And then it will go through the process of registering the connector. And now once it's complete, we'll click Finish. The connector configuration control panel will show up. You'll notice that it will indicate our current connection into the Centrify Identity Platform. If we go over to the Connector tab, this will give us the ability to make some modifications, including the ability to re-register it if we happen to change customer ID numbers. We can also set up the settings update interval, the Active Directory verification interval, as well as the auto update information and web proxy. So we'll go ahead and click Close, and we'll close the dialog to download the software. And we'll go ahead and give this a quick refresh. Now we can refresh the web page, of course, using the browser, or I can simply select Reload Rights from the user profile menu. Now as you can see, we now have our first connector. And along with the connector information, we also have enabled services, as you can see here. AD proxy, application gateway, LDAP proxy, Radius server, RDP service, SSH service, and web server. And it's currently active. So this is how we're going to set up connectors using credentials. In another technical demonstration, we'll take a look at how we set up connectors using a registration code.